We're speaking about the art of laughing, and it's really an art because a lot of people, when things happen, they just really want to cry, you know. And sometimes things look so bad, you just want to cry. But number one, why should you? When should you cry? Because we say it's ace livchois, base livchod. There's a time to cry and there's time to dance. What's the time to cry? What's the time to dance? And number two, how does this fit into 3 weeks? Tisha B'av, Shiva de Nechimta, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Elul, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, and Shmini Atzeret. So let's try to understand that, right? So we just got through a very intense 3 weeks of preparing ourselves for Tisha B'av, and Tisha B'av, hopefully if we're zeiche to cry on Tisha B'av, to open up our hearts. And I have to tell you, Tisha B'av morning, I was in South Africa. I was preparing kinos for the shul that I was speaking in, and suddenly I was overcome by very intense emotions learning one of the kinos, and I realized like all of the sorrows that Klal Yisrael have because the base of Mikdash is not with us, and I realized one of my very very close talmidim was suffering so much, and it was a different country. I called him up, and I just said, Ploni, I said, I really feel for your tzaras, and we cried together. We cried together. And this crying, that crying is very, very critical. Realizing what we're missing. If you don't cry, if you can't cry, it's a sign that you haven't yet realized the extent of what we're missing. Because a person cries for something he's really missing, right? But once we got to that point, once we felt that we don't have the base of English, we're lacking the base of English, and we're missing so much. So what's the next step, right? Once we feel really alone that the relationship, right? We're here at the base of English now, and we don't have the bird offering, which you throw the bird on the ground and see the stomach be absorbed into the floor. You don't see the Shekhinah, you don't see the smoke going straight up even when it's 100-mile-an-hour winds. You don't see the 10 constant miracles that happen here. You don't feel the Shekhinah as much, even though certainly you feel a little bit here by the coastal, and if you're Zochah to get inside, to daven in the next to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Certainly you feel it, but not like it's really meant to be. So what's the next step, and how does this fit into everything that's going on? So we just got through Tisha B'av. We said the avoda now is nechama, right? We had Shabbos Nachamu, right? Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, and now we have 7 haftarahs of nechama, right? And then 2 haftarahs of tshuva. And as we explained in the last class, nechama means seeing things in perspective, understanding that the reason that you're crying is really a reason to laugh. Yeah, it's part of a greater whole which we're not seeing, and that's nechama. That's the shiva de nechemta. The avoda right now is nechama, is to see what's going on, see the entire history of Klal Yisrael, see the tremendous growth and beauty, Torah, tefillah that's going on today, Beinam Lechavero, Beinam Lamakam, and as much as possible to comfort ourselves and to laugh. That's the first stage. But then we're going to have another stage here, right? Which is going to be in a week and a half. It's going to be El. Another 8 days is going to be Yom Kippur Katan, and we're going to start a whole new cycle over here, whole new Magal, as follows, right? We're going to go through the Chua process, and the Chua process. Someone once told me at Esha Torah the most depressing day of the whole year was Motzi Yom Kippur. Why? Because people said, "Oh, I did this and I did this." Gimel Everest Chamuras, I did a Vodazara, Gila Rayas, Shvichas Damim sometimes even. So it was very, very depressing. And the Chua process is not supposed to be depressing. My Rebbe, Rav Moshe Sternbach's Shlita should be healthy till 120. Avducha Moshe ben Dvorah, right? He brings from the Rambam. The Rambam says the goal of tshuva is to separate yourself from the Veras, right? To show that they're not really part of you. They have nothing to do with you. That's the first level, right? But like we're not right. But we're not allowed to say our Averas are good. I once asked the Shaila, wrote it up in a tshuva. We can't say Kol Ma'adavid Rachman Latov of it. We're not allowed to say it. You have to know though the goal is tshuva ma'ava. A person who does tshuva mi'ava, his averas become zchuyos. His transgressions become merits, and it becomes an impotence for him to grow. And this is going to depend on how we cry for our averas. Now, as we said in the last class, there's 2 types of crying. When Rabbi Kiva heard the Chachamim crying after they saw foxes coming to the Kodesh Kedoshim, he sensed a tiny drop of yush there, of despair, and that's not the right crying. The Chachamim tell us, that when Torah tells us that when Klal Yisrael was on the Yam Suf, Hashem said, "Mati tzakalai, why are you crying? Why are you screaming out to me?" Right? And the Kadmonim say that there was an element of yush in their crying. Right? There's an element of yush in their crying. This type of crying is not what Hashem wanted. Hashem wanted them to just go straight into the Yam. According to the Yalkut Shmoni, they were meant to sing Shir right away. They sang Shir before they went into the Yam. Chiddushim from the Yalkut Shmoni. You're not supposed to cry out of Yish. If you cry, you're supposed to cry out of Umun and B'tachon Hashem. There's a beautiful idea from the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes says, right, Kashem shemenichnas av m'maitam b'simcha, kach meshenichnas adar mar b'simcha. Says the Sfas Emes, the two emotions are tied together. The person who really cried, meshenichnas av, right, the person who came to that recognition of the loss through true crying not out of yush, but out of amun and bitachon to Hashem that He's the only source of salvation. That's the person will have simcha and adar when adar comes in, because we know adar is the samcha and gula, the gula. The simcha of Purim is the beginning of the simcha of Nisan, as Rashi says, sama gula gula, may nisim heim, Purim Pesach, right? The crying of the 3 weeks and the 9 days, that is the impetus, says the Sfas Emes. That's the seeds for this joy of Adar. And this is how the Vilna Gaon explains the pasuk of Oz v'hadar levusha v'tislach goyim achron. Says the Gra, Oz v'hadar, that's levusha, that's Yom Kippur. V'tislach yom achron is Shmini Atzeres. On Yom Kippur, we're supposed to cry, but not out of yush, not because we're so upset about all the terrible things that we did, right? We're supposed to cry to Hashem because Hashem can turn our averas into mitzvahs. Those same experiences that we had, which we shouldn't have had them, right? We made a wrong choice, right? It wasn't the right choice, right? But akoma davar rachman l'tov, right? Hashem allowed us to do the avera. He gave us free choice. He could have stopped us because there's potential in every single avera to come closer and closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to do tshuva mi'ava, and to come even closer to Hashem. That's oz v'hadar levusha, right? A person who does tshuva mi'ava, right, who cries on Rosh Hashanah, Tshuva, Yom Kippur, right? That person can come close to Hashem, right? And then come close to Hashem, then your sukkahs will be filled of joy. We'll be dancing here in the base of English. But says the Gra, the peak of everything, B'tischak Yoim Achron, that's Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres is the Bechina of Olam Haba, right? In Olam Haba, we'll understand why every single thing had to happen, and how it happened, and why this happened, that happened. Olam Haba, all elements of time were removed, as the Gra says, Bereshis Barashes, the Zohar says, the first thing Hashem did was create time. We're all trapped in time. We have to, as a word, try and remove ourselves from the fetters of time, and we do that by saying, Koma davar Tovavid. The master was Nachum Ish Gamzu Latova. He was totally out of time. He realized that time is complete checker. It doesn't exist. In Hashem's world, there's only one Retzif. There's only one spectrum of everything, right? But in this world, we have time. B'tislach Yoim Achron, right, means that the last day, right, Shmini Atzeres, when we finished from Rosh Hashanah until Shmini Atzeres, then we can laugh. B'tislach Yoim Achron, to go through that whole process. We have to go through the process of crying and laughing. But the goal is, and this is what the Gra says, the goal is B'tislach Yoim Achron. The goal is to feel the tremendous, tremendous joy and laughter, right? And this was Rav Kiva's message to Chamim as they were coming out, as they were crying by the foxes of Kodesh Kedoshim, as they were crying when Rabbi Lezer was so sick. Always understand that the goal is to laugh. The end goal is always to laugh, is always to feel joy, is always to feel simcha. You have to do it with sensitivity. You have to do it with care, right? You have to do it in a way that it's not going to be a Chil Hashem. But the goal is to laugh, and even in the crying, there has to be an element of laughing. This is Rabbi Kiva who's coming to teach us. So B'ezrat Hashem, we should be all zeiche, tislach liyoim achron, all of the difficulties we have in our life, if they might be parnasa, with brios, with shalom bayis, with chinuch, with livelihood, sustenance, health, um, children, or shalom bayis, domestic tranquility. All these areas, we should see that they're all really good. We should be able to laugh, right? If your spouse is throwing a pot at your head, don't laugh because it'll just make them more upset, right? First, you should duck, and then you should try to comfort them. But we should know that the goal is to laugh. Really, the goal is to laugh, and the more we laugh, right, the more joy that we can feel from everything that in our life, especially the things which there's darkness, because we know the rule of the Zohar says, "Lafi rova choshech is rov or," right? Klipa kodemas lapri, that there's a peel. Why everything good thing is a peel. When we're peeling off the peel, we see the darkness, and that's really the time to try and laugh and try to feel joy. Hashem should help us in this very worthy endeavor. Amen. Cain. T.A. Ratzon.